Dave?
You might want to put your
Give me a thumbs up.
You
Good? Okay, good evening, everybody. I'd like to call to order the June 2022 meeting of the PMASD Board of Education. Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, roll call.
Mrs. Dalton?
Here.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Here.
Mr. Hardesty?
Here.
Mr. Packer?
Here.
Mr. Polenick?
Here.
Mrs. Tate?
Here.
Mr. Rainey is excused. Mrs. Smiley?
Here.
Mrs. Williams is excused. I am present. Mr. Johnston?
Here.
Mrs. Dolges is excused. Mrs. Zeglin?
Here.
Mr. Grimaldi is excused. Mr. Dalton?
Here.
Mr. Gramling?
Here.
Mrs. Dalby?
Here.
Mrs. Sleppy?
Here.
And Mr. Saffron is excused.
How about me?
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Here?
Yeah, I'm here. Okay, are there any presentations this evening?
There are none.
Okay. We do have an item to add to tonight's agenda. Did everybody get the, okay. That, it will be an addition to the athletic committee, and the motion will be, it will be 16C, hire head volleyball coach, and the motion will read, there will be a motion to hire Mrs. Lisa Donatelli as the head volleyball coach pending all clearances and required training at a salary of $4,223.03 as per the current collective bargaining agreement between the Penns Manor Area School District and the Penns Manor Education Association dated August 1, 2019 through July 31, 2022. Okay, so with that addition, can we have a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Any questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. I know Mr. Saffron always asks me to do this twice, so do I have to do?
So you approve, have that added, now you're approving the overall agenda.
Okay, I think you're right.
That's
So
correct.
can we have a motion to approve the amendment? Thank you, Mr. Hardesty. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Any questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, we'll move on to citizens' remarks, if there are any this evening. Okay, the minutes of our last meeting included in your packet. Can we have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, a motion to adopt the minutes as printed. The business report also included in your packet. Can we have a motion to approve the financial report?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Questions? Roll call?
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Motion by Mrs. Tate, second by Mr. Hardesty. Motion carries.
Okay, presentation of bills. Can we have a motion to authorize payment of the bills as presented? The general account has bills totaling $231,640.16, and that's for 2021-22. And okay, that's it. Can we have a motion?
I'll make the motion. I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Are there any questions? Roll call?
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Motion by Mrs. Dalton, second by Mrs. Smiley. Motion carries.
Okay, any program updates this evening?
There are none.
All right. Okay, that brings us to our reports, beginning with the superintendent report. Mr. Johnston.
Sure. Just want to go through some reminders on the agenda and some other new items at the end. First, under Curriculum Committee, this evening, we're asking you to approve an agreement with Edgenuity for the 22-23 school year, the cost of $6,559. That's the same as the previous year. We're also asking you this evening to approve our health and safety plan for next school year. I want to remind everyone that we are required to approve our health and safety plan. Our health and safety plan will be exactly what we've been doing at the end of the year. However, should we get into situations throughout the 22-23 school year, we would follow the recommendations given to us by the Department of Health. So that's outlined in the health and safety plan. Also under C, we're asking you to approve emergency instructional template. That's a requirement. The state is permitting school districts again for the 22-23 school year to submit and approve the instructional template for next school year. Should we get into a situation that we have to go remote, just know in that plan there's 3 instructional structures put in that plan. One is to have high school remote, elementary in person. The second is to vice versa. And then, of course, third option is both buildings are out and remote. Again, both of those are going to be needing to be submitted to the Department of Ed, which we will do after tonight's approval. Under Budget and Finance, asking for you to approve remaining bills for the 21-22 fiscal year to be paid. Also asking you to award unleaded gasoline bids to Glassmere Fuel Service Incorporated for bids, to award the bid to them. Asking you to award the liquid propane bid to Farrell Gas. Ooh, I should get that right. Farrell Gas. I better get that right for you. 14D, award diesel fuel to American Natural Saturdays. Also asking you to approve tonight the medical, dental, and vision rates for 22-23. Medical insurance coverage is increasing for the district next year by 12.9%. Dental and vision will remain the same. Also asking you to approve a workers' compensation insurance for the 22-23 school year at a total cost of $26,567. That is an increase of $580 from last year. Also asking you to approve cafeteria equipment purchase, which is a 40-gallon kettle purchased from Trimark at a cost of $19,700. Under Buildings and Grounds, asking you to approve an agreement with Waste Management for the next 3 years starting in October. Cost will be $871.61 monthly. That is a 6% increase the first year. Second year, 6% or consumer, remind me what the P is.
CPI.
Yep,
Consumer
and what's-
Price Index.
Say that again?
Consumer Price Index.
Consumer Price Index, forgot the P, sorry. Whichever one's the lower, same with the third year of that agreement. Next, 15B, approve agreement with Tom Talmadge Painting to complete painting interior and exterior at a cost of $9,950. Asking you for 5C, to approve agreement with Perry Driveway Sealing at a cost of $8,800 to patch and seal coat parking lots. This year, the area would be the elementary gym parking lot, and then going back around the back side of the high school at the loading dock for the high school cafeteria. That lot will be done at the same time. Asking 15D for your approval to approve CNL installers to complete work removing carpet in the elementary guidance office, installing carpet tiles, so removing vinyl floor tile, putting in carpet tile, also fixing a hallway joint in the high school, and also third, replacing the carpet, removing the carpet in room 20 at the high school and replacing it with commercial tile. Total cost $12,842. 16E, asking you to approve agreement with Myron Davis to replace 6 chalkboards throughout the district at a total cost of $5,950. Also asking you on 16F to approve a Gardner System Service Solution Agreement for a building HVAC automation at the cost of $2,700. Also asking under Buildings and Grounds for you to approve agreement for us to have gym floor maintenance done to both gyms at the high school and elementary at a cost of $6,550. Also asking you to approve agreement with C&H Fencing, where we'll be having a job completing by removing fence at the district's sewage treatment plant of approximately 133 feet, taking out the old and installing new. Under athletics, asking you to approve a volunteer, Mrs. Horwath, for the girls basketball program. Also asking you to approve citizen ambulance agreement, service agreement at $4,900 for the upcoming year. We do have one driver asking you to approve for transportation this evening. Under technology special projects, asking you to approve the EdLeo renewal, which is our district website, at a cost of $4,200 for the upcoming year. 2 other agreements for you to approve this evening is Seesaw at the elementary at a cost of $1,986, and at the high school, CAMI at a cost of $2,796. Also at 8D, asking you to approve the purchase of 83 Chromebooks for teachers and instructional assistants. Cost will be covered under the Emergency Connectivity Fund, which is all reimbursed back to the district, that total cost. Under new business, asking you to approve Dr. Tomiko as the school dentist for the 22-23 school year, where he'll be charging $1 per exam, so we appreciate him doing that. Also, asking you to approve 2 outside placements that took place at the end of the school year. One was an elementary student, and the cost is $289 per day. Another student at Adelphi for a cost of $92.15 per day. Also asking you to approve the upcoming year an agreement with Adelphi where it gives us the opportunity, should we need to, send students, but to remind you, we ask for your approval as we approach any student that needs to be placed there for the 3 different programs, which is the behavioral support, credit recovery, and day treatment programs. 21E, asking you to approve agreement with Aaron IU to participate in their guest teacher program for next school year, which is a cost of $500. Next, asking you to approve a 5-year agreement with Sapphire. That is the system, of course, that houses all of our student information system. Total cost each year will be $22,443. That is an increase from this previous year to the first year of 6%. And then again, that remains $22,443 for each year for 5 years. Asking you also under 21G to appoint Mr. Saffron as our school solicitor. Costs remain the same as last year. 21H, asking you to approve Navigate 360 renewal, which is our ALICE training online for all of our staff, $2,350. Also asking you to approve posting and advertising for 4-hour per day Secretary B, which is a reduction in one of the current Secretary B positions, effective July 2nd. Asking you to approve the closing of the position of Director of Education, effective July 2nd. Then asking for your approval for posting and advertising for a K through 12 assistant principal. That position would be 205 days. Also asking you to grant permission to sell 22 unused communication radios to Greenwich Radios for a total amount of $600. And then, of course, we have some student recognitions that Mr. Packer will mention at the end of the meeting. Also want to point out that we have completed officially the special education audit. We actually finalized that out today. So thanks to Mrs. Delby, along with the other administrators, Mrs. Rohrbaugh as the special ed secretary, and all the support staff and teachers. I will tell you that they were highly impressed with everything that they took a look at. There is only one thing that we will need to work at, and that is actually doing training with our parents asking them to come in so that we can train on any different subject within special education. That's the only thing that we're getting really signs of improvement that we need to do. So hats off to all those individuals for that audit to be completed. So hats off to all of you. Thanks. Also want to mention that hats off to Nicole, sitting to my right, federal programs. That audit is complete. Same, coming out with glowing remarks. I think there's one minor thing that we need to work on, but again, hats off to her for completing all of that, going through that official audit, and I believe now we're good for 4 years?
Yes.
Good. Also want to just mention that we do have a couple things going on. Currently, we have extended school year going on throughout the district. We also have credit recovery starting at the high school. And then I would just ask Mr. Packer that we would have a few minutes for an executive session at the end.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Johnston.
Yep.
Anything else under any of the other reports?
There are none.
Okay. Any old business? Mrs. Eckenrode, anything for negotiations?
Nothing tonight, Mr. Packer.
Okay, Mrs. Williams is not here this evening, so Mrs. Eckenrode is going to fill in for her on curriculum.
Okay, 13A, approve renewal with Imagine Learning, formerly Edgenuity. I'd like to make the motion to renew the agreement as presented with Imagine Learning for a concurrent user license virtual classroom and web administrator, allowing the Penns Manor Area Cyber Academy access to all Imagine Learning courses and world languages for a total cost of $6,599 for the 2022-2023 school year. I'll second.
Questions? Roll call?
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Motion by Mrs. Eckenrode, second by Mrs. Tate. Motion carries.
Item 13B, approve health and safety plan for 2022-23. I'd like to make the motion to approve the Penns Manor Area School District's health and safety plan for 2022-2023 school year as presented.
Second.
Questions? Roll call?
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Motion by Mrs. Eckenrode, second by Mr. Hardesty. Motion carries.
Item 13C, approve emergency instructional time template, section 520.1 for 2022-23. I'd like to make the motion to approve the Penns Manor Area School District's emergency instruction time template, section 520.1 for the 2022-23 school year as presented. I'll second it.
Questions? Roll call?
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Motion by Mrs. Eckenrode, second by Mrs. Dalton. Motion carries.
That's all I have, Mr. Packer.
Thank you, Mrs.
You're
Eckenrode.
welcome.
Okay, move on to Budget and Finance Committee. Mrs. Tate?
Okay, I have a number of things this evening. First one, 14A, approve to pay remaining bills for the 2021-22 fiscal year. I'd like to make the motion to approve and authorize the business manager to pay all remaining bills for the 2021-22 fiscal year.
I'll second.
Questions? Roll call?
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Motion by Mrs. Tate. Was the second by Mrs. Smiley, or was it you? Okay, the second by Mrs. Smiley. Motion carries.
14B, award unleaded gasoline bid. I'd like to make the motion to award the bid for unleaded gasoline 87 octane to Glassmere Fuel Service, Inc. for a period of 1 year, 2022 to 2023, at the variable delivered prices as follows: 500 gallons, to 1,499 gallons at the variable delivered price adjustment to rack of 1905 per gallon, adjusted to the OPUS, Oil Price Information Service, average rack price posting, or positing for the Pittsburgh area. 1,500 gallons and up at the variable delivered price adjustment to rack of 1375 per gallon, adjusted to the OPUS, Oil Price Information Service, average rack price posting for the Pittsburgh area.
I'll second.
Questions? Roll call?
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Motion by Mrs. Tate, second by Mrs. Eckenrode, motion carries.
14C, award liquid propane bid. I would like to make the motion to award the bid for liquid propane gas to Feral Gas at the fixed rate for the year 2022-2023 of $1.99 per gallon, and to award the bid for liquid propane gas to Feral Gas at the fixed rate for the year 2023-2024 of $1.86 per gallon, with the understanding that the price per gallon of propane gas includes the supplying by Feral Gas of the fuel storage tank, fuel dispensing equipment, delivery of gas, and all related services as more specifically outlined in the request for bids at no additional cost to the school district.
Second.
Questions? Roll call?
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Motion by Mrs. Tate, second by Mr. Hardesty, motion carries.
14D, award diesel fuel bid. I would like to make the motion to award the bid for ultra-low sulfur diesel fuel to American Natural Satterley Leasing for a period of 1 year, 2022 to 2023, at the variable delivered prices as follows: 500 gallons to 2,999 gallons delivered at the variable price adjustment to rack of $16.25 per gallon, adjusted to the OPUS, Oil Price Information Service. Average rack price posting for the Pittsburgh area. 5,999 gallons delivered at the variable price adjustment to rack of $9.85 per gallon, $985 per gallon, adjusted to the OPUS, Oil Price Information Service, average rack price posting for the Pittsburgh area. 6,000 to 7,999 gallons delivered to the variable price adjustment to the rack of 415.0415 per gallon, adjusted to the OPUS, Oil Price Information Service, average rack price posting for the Pittsburgh area. 8,000 gallons and up delivered to the variable price adjustment to the rack of 0.380 per gallon, adjusted to the OPUS, Oil Price Information Service, average rack price posting for the Pittsburgh area.
I'll second.
Questions? Roll call?
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Motion by Mrs. Tate, second by Mrs. Eckenrode, motion carries.
14E, medical dental vision rates for 2022-23. I would like to make the motion to approve the 2022-23 medical trust rates, vision trust rates, and dental trust rates as presented.
I'll second.
Thank you. Questions? Roll call?
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Motion by Mrs. Tate, second by Mrs. Dalton, motion carries.
14F, workers' compensation 22-23. I would like to make the motion to purchase workers' compensation insurance from AmTrust North America for the 2022-23 fiscal year at the cost of $26,567 as presented.
I'll second.
Questions? Roll call?
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Motion by Mrs. Tate, second by Mrs. Smiley, motion carries.
Okay, 14G, approved cafeteria equipment purchase. I would like to make the motion to approve the purchase of a 40-gallon stationary electric kettle, Cleveland Range model number KEL40 through Costars, contract number 036-006 from Trimark for the cafeteria in the amount of $19,700 as presented.
Second.
Questions? Roll call?
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Motion by Mrs. Tate, second by Mr. Hardesty, motion carries.
And that's all I have this evening, Mr. Packer.
Thank you, Mrs. Tate. Okay, Buildings and Grounds, Mr. Rainey is not here this evening, but Mr. Hardesty is going to
Thank you,
step in
Mr.
and do
Packer.
that.
15A, approved waste management agreement. I make the motion to approve a non-hazardous waste 3-year agreement with Waste Management in the amount of $871.46 monthly as presented. The agreement will start on October 10th, 2022 and end on October the 10th, 2025.
I'll second.
Questions? Roll call?
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Motion by Mr. Hardesty, second by Mrs. Eckenrode, motion carries.
15B, approve agreement with Tom Talmadge Painting. I make the motion to approve agreement with Tom Talmadge Painting for the painting of the facilities at a cost not to exceed $9,950 as presented. Costs will be covered using the 2022-23 Building and Ground General Operating Funds.
Second.
Questions? Roll call?
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Motion by Mr. Hardesty, second by Mr. Polenick, motion carries.
15C, approve agreement with Perry Driveway Sealing. I make the motion to approve the agreement with Perry Sealing and Asphalt at a cost of $8,800 to seal coat 52,000?
That should be 52,000. You're correct, Mr.
52,000
Hardesty.
square feet of parking lot and paint parking lines as presented. Costs will be covered using the 2022-23 Buildings and Grounds General Operating Funds.
I'll second.
Questions? Roll call?
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Motion by Mr. Hardesty, second by Mrs. Tate, motion carries.
15D, approve agreement with C&L Installers. I make the motion to approve an agreement with C&L Installers to remove VCT flooring and replace with carpet tiles in the elementary guidance office, repair a floor expansion joint in the high school hallway near room 16, and remove the carpet and install commercial vinyl tile in classroom 20 at the high school at a cost of $12,842 as presented. The cost will be covered using the 2021-22 Buildings and Grounds General Operating Funds.
I'll second.
Questions? Roll call?
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Motion by Mr. Hardesty, second by Mrs. Eckenrode, motion carries.
15E, approve agreement with Myron Davis to replace chalkboards. I would like to make the motion to approve an agreement with Myron Davis to replace 6 chalkboards throughout the district at a cost of $5,950 as presented. The cost will be covered using the 2021-2022 Buildings and Grounds General Operating Funds.
Second.
Questions? Roll call?
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Motion by Mr. Hardesty, second by Mr. Polenick, motion carries.
15C, approve Gardner Systems Service Solutions Agreement for building HVAC automation. I'd like to make the motion to approve an agreement with Gardner for building HVAC automation at a cost of $2,700 for a 1-year agreement as presented. The cost will be covered using the 2021-22 Buildings and Grounds General Operating Funds.
I'll second.
Questions? Roll call?
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Motion by Mr. Hardesty, second by Mrs. Smiley, motion carries.
15G, approve agreement with gym floor maintenance service, or for gym floor maintenance service. I'd like to make the motion to approve an agreement with All American Athletes to complete gym floor maintenance at a cost of $6,550 as presented. The cost will be covered using 2022-23 Buildings and Grounds General Operating Funds.
Second.
Questions? Roll call?
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Motion by Mr. Hardesty, second by Mrs. Dalton, motion carries.
15H, approve agreement with C&H Fencing. I make the motion to approve an agreement with C&H Fencing LLC in the amount of $11,470.25 to remove old fence and install approximately 133 feet of 6-foot tall wire chain link fence at the district sewage treatment facility as presented. The cost will be covered using the 2021-22 Buildings and Grounds General Operating Funds.
I'll second.
Questions? Roll call?
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Motion by Mr. Hardesty, second by Mrs. Tate, motion carries.
Mr. Packer, that's all we have. I think it's enough to keep Mr. Dalton busy this time.
I think so. Thank you, Mr. Hardesty. All right, so we'll move on to Athletic Committee. And Mrs. Dalton.
Yes, Mr. Packer. I have 16A, approved athletic volunteer. I'd like to make a motion to approve the following sports volunteers for the 2022-23 school year, pending the receipt of all current clearances, cardio and impact testing, and coaching education courses as required by the PIAA. Carly Horwath, girls basketball.
I'll second.
Questions? Roll call?
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Motion by Mrs. Dalton, second by Mrs. Tate, motion carries.
I have 16B, approve citizens ambulance service agreement. I'd like to make a motion to approve an agreement with Citizens Ambulance Service to the amount of $4,900 effective July 1st, 2022 through June 30th, 2023 as presented.
I'll second.
Questions? Roll call?
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Motion by Mrs. Dalton, second by Mrs. Smiley, motion carries.
I have 16C, hire head volleyball coach. I'd like to make a motion to hire Mrs. Lisa Donatelli as the head volleyball coach pending all clearances and required test training at a salary of $4,223.03 as per the current collective bargaining agreement between the Penns Manor Area School District and the Penns Manor Education Association dated August 1st, 2019 to July 31st, 2022.
Second?
Questions?
If perchance we have a new teacher's contract at that point, this could change price-wise?
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions? Roll call?
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Motion by Mrs. Dalton, second by Mrs. Eckenrode, motion carries.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Dalton.
Thank you.
We'll move on to Transportation Committee. Mrs. Smiley.
I have 17A, approved drivers for 2021-2022 school year. I'd like to make the motion to approve the following bus drivers and substitutes for Tri-County Transportation for the 2021-2022 school year. Judine Lee.
I'll second.
Questions? Roll call?
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Motion by Mrs. Smiley, second by Mrs. Tate, motion carries.
That's all I have this evening, Mr.
Thank you,
Mayor.
Mrs. Smiley. Okay, Technology and Special Project Committee. Mr. Polenick.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Packer. I have a few items this evening. First is approve EDLEO renewal. I'd like to make a motion to approve a one-year agreement with EDLEO for the 2022-23 school year, the amount of $4,200 as presented.
Second?
Questions? Roll call?
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Motion by Mr. Polenick, second by Mrs. Eckenrode, motion carries.
Second item is approve Seesaw renewal. I'd like to make the motion to approve a one-year agreement with Seesaw for the 2022-2023 school year in the amount of $1,986.
I'll second.
Questions? Roll call?
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Motion by Mr. Polenick, second by Mrs. Tate, motion carries.
Third item, 18C, approve CAMI renewal. I'd like to make the motion to approve a one-year agreement with CAMI for the 2022-23 school year in the amount of $2,796 as presented.
I'll second.
Questions? Roll call?
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Motion by Mr. Polenick, second by Mrs. Smiley, motion carries.
18D, approve Chromebook purchase. I'd like to make the motion to approve a purchase of 83 Chromebooks and licenses from Trafera PA, CoStars ITC, CoStars-3 IT hardware contract number 003-385 in the amount of $33,117 which will be covered by emergency connectivity funding E-rate.
Second?
Questions? Roll call.
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Motion by Mr. Polenick, second by Mr. Hardesty, motion carries.
That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Planick. Nothing under policies, nothing under correspondence.
Nothing this evening.
Okay, we'll move on to new business. 22A, approve Dr. Tomiko as a school dentist for 2022-23. Can we have a motion to appoint Dr. Adam Tomiko as the district's dentist for the 2022-23 school year at the contracted fee of $1 per exam?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Questions? Roll call.
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Motion by Mrs. Tate. Second by Mr. Hardesty, motion carries.
You know, it's nice to have an alumni step in to do that. Yeah, very nice. Okay, 21B, approved placement of student 20468 at New Story. Can we have a motion to approve the enrollment of student number 20468 at New Story located in Indiana, PA? Cost is $289 per school day.
I'll make the motion.
Second?
Questions? Roll call.
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Motion by Mrs. Eckenrode, second by Mr. Hardesty, motion carries.
Okay, 21C, approved placement of student number 69481 at Delphi Educational Services. Can we have a motion to approve the enrollment of student number 69481 into Delphi Education Services? The cost is $92.15 per school day.
Second?
Can we have a motion?
You need a motion. I'll do.
motion.
Second? Mrs. Dahl?
I do have a question.
Okay.
On these two, 21B and C, those are past school year, is that correct?
This is just at the end of the school
Yes.
year. We did, yes.
That's what I meant, yeah. Thank you.
Any further questions or discussion? Roll call?
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Motion by Mr. Hardesty, second by Mrs. Dalton, motion carries.
21D, approve a Delphi Education Service for 2022-23 agreement. Can we have a motion to approve an agreement with the Delphi Educational Services as a service provider for an alternative education program placement during the 2022-23 school year, should the administration seem it necessary to enroll a student in a Delphi's behavioral support day treatment or YES credit recovery program as presented. The daily rates are behavioral support program and the YES credit recovery program, $94.91 for a regular education student and $104.48 for a special education student. Day treatment program is $134.91 for a regular education student and $141.07 for a special education student.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Questions? Roll call?
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Motion by Mrs. Smiley, second by Mrs. Eckenrode, motion carries.
Okay, 21E, approve agreement with Aaron IU 28 to participate in the guest teacher program for 2022-23. Can we have a motion to participate in the Aaron IU 28 guest teacher program during the 2022-23 school year at the cost of $500?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Questions? Roll call?
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Motion by Mrs. Tate, second by Mrs. Dalton, motion carries.
Okay, 21F, approve a 5-year agreement with Sapphire. Can we have a motion to approve a 5-year agreement subscription of Sapphire, which is the student information system used to maintain all students' records at the annual rate of $22,443 for the subscription and an annual fee of $1,325 for the services effective July 1, 2022 through June 30, 2027 as presented. This is a 6% increase from the previous 5-year agreement. Do we have a motion?
Make the motion.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Questions? Roll call?
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Motion by Mr. Polenick, second by Mrs. Tate, motion carries.
Okay, 21G, appoint school solicitor. Can we have a motion to appoint Ronald J. Saffron, Esquire, as the district solicitor for 1-year term upon the term set forth in the agreement per the enclosure at the contracted retainer rate of $3,500 and an hourly rate of $75 fee for work related to issues and refunding bonds, notes, and other obligations shall be negotiated by the district and the solicitor at the time of such borrowings and shall reflect the rates customary in the industry at such time.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Questions? Roll call?
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Motion by Mrs. Eckenrode, second by Mrs. Dalton, motion carries.
We all kind of knew Mr. Hardesty was going to be a little slow on that. But I will say, Mr. Saffron, how long have you been a solicitor?
I believe since 1994.
That's a long time.
Yes, it is. I
But-
want to apologize for being late.
Doesn't bode well.
I didn't realize the exit for Penn Run was
Ah.
closed. And so I drove, of course, past that and then panicked and came back and had to get off the Indiana exit to come back on 422 East. Tried it all over again and it didn't work any better the second time. So then I decided, well, I know you're not supposed to make U-turns, but I may have made a couple. And then I decided maybe I didn't go far enough on 422 East, and I followed that. Oh, it's a couple miles, and then finally there was a detour sign and another one going left for detour, and that's how I made it here. But I did get to see quite a bit of the countryside.
Maybe we should adjust that salary.
Yeah.
No, actually, I do. You know what? It's an opportunity for me just to talk to everybody about the good work that you've done for this district, and we've been
Thank you.
very fortunate to have you for those years.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Just to clarify, he wasn't on the clock, right?
That's why I said maybe we ought to.
I was going to ask you,
All right.
is that a PennDOT project?
Be careful there.
Be careful, there's big signs. There's big signs to follow.
Even in West Virginia, we can spell detour.
Well, in my defense, it did say detour 1,500 feet. And when I went to 1,500 feet, you weren't going to detour there. And so the detour is actually about 3 miles.
That's true.
And that's what really, made me not do well. And I didn't take my car today, which has a GPS, so I was really lost.
Oh. All right, 21H, approve Navigate 360 renewal. Can we have a motion to approve Navigate 360 renewal in the amount of $2,350 for Ellis online training of staff during the 2022-23 school year as presented?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Questions? Roll call?
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Motion by Mrs. Tate, second by Mrs. Dalton, motion carries.
Okay, 21I, approve posting and advertising for 4-hour per day, Secretary B. Can we have a motion to reduce one full-time Secretary B position from a full-time position to a 4-hour per day Secretary B position effective July 2, 2022, and to grant administration permission to post and advertise for the 4-hour per day Secretary B position?
I'll make a motion.
Second?
Questions? Roll call?
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Motion by Mrs. Smiley, second by Mr. Hardesty, motion carries.
Okay, 21J, approve closing the position of Director of Education effective July 2, 2022. Can we have a motion to close the position of Director of Education position effective July 2, 2022?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Questions?
I have a question. Well, my experience here, we've not done a closure like this, and I guess it goes down to 12 if we're, or K. If we're doing J to close it, why are not we creating the position of assistant principal?
So I was I was advised by the Beard Group that since there's a current agreement, and if you're not filling it, you need to identify that you're closing.
Because he's in the
Second.
Act 93.
Yep, and so
Okay.
actually, permission is to post and advertise, and then there will be another motion then to hire, and that creates it.
Answered well, thank you.
Yep.
Okay,
Should it read something like remove? I guess if we close it,
I just used the wording.
I
they
know what
advised
you're
me to use.
saying. I'm thinking too hard. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
okay, any other questions? Roll call?
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Motion by Mrs. Eckenrode, second by Mr. Hardesty, motion carries.
21K, approve posting and advertising for a K through 12 assistant principal. Can we have a motion to grant administration permission to post and advertise for a K through 12 assistant principal? That would be for 205 days per school year.
Make the motion.
I'll second.
Questions? Roll call?
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Motion by Mr. Polenick, second by Mrs. Smiley, motion carries.
Okay, 21L, grant permission to sell 22 unused communication radios to Greenwich Radios for $600. Can we have a motion to grant administration permission to sell 22 unused communication radios to Greenwich Radios for $600?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Are there any questions or discussion? Roll call?
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Motion by Mr. Hardesty, second by Mrs. Dalton, motion carries.
Okay, under the 21M student recognition, we have 2 students that had won at District 6 track meet. They were Alex Polenick, who took first place in the discus and 7th in the shot put, and Justin Marshall, 4th place in the 100-meter dash, and Both of these students qualified and participated in the state track meet. That's quite an accomplishment for both of these young men. Okay, 22, we have a motion to approve the field trips or conferences.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Thank you. Any questions? Roll call?
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polinick?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Motion by Mrs. Eckenrode, second by Mrs. Tate. Motion carries.
Okay,
Can I say something?
yeah, you can, because I was just going to say.
So I have to apologize to all of you because we removed all of the motions that had to do with approving the budget for next school year and along with the comprehensive plan because once you approve the proposed and the comprehensive plan, you have discussion, there needs to be the 30-day window. Mr. Saffron reminded me that today is the 28th day, so we are off. So I apologize not having the foresight to make sure that this particular meeting tonight wasn't maybe kicked to next week. But we do now need to complete having a special meeting to vote on the budget and any of the motions that go with the budget along with the comprehensive plan anywhere from, well, actually Monday to June 30th. So any date that is convenient to the group. And again, I apologize.
It's going to be a
that I
quick
did not-
meeting, folks, I think.
And it's about 8, 9 with the comprehensive plan. 9 motions.
You want to just keep it on a Wednesday?
Yeah.
Do you,
Whatever's convenient. Well, I may need to use the 15th though. Remember negotiations.
oh, okay. How about the following week?
Well, unless we break and have a meeting. I would rather prefer saving the 15th.
Huh?
We may need it.
22nd?
Whenever, then it's convenient for anybody else.
I won't be here, but that's fine. I'll be on vacation, but if everyone else can be here, that's fine.
Is 22nd okay?
I'm okay.
You don't know yet?
I believe so.
Let's try to set it for the 22nd right now.
Okay. June 22nd.
At one time.
Yeah, that's a good question. What time?
Again, that's perfect to all of you too.
You want it earlier?
6.
Keep it at 7.
I think 7.
7.
I'm fine with that.
I gotta get up from my nap.
Okay, we'll better keep it
I
at
want you to give
7.
input since I,
Okay.
What time?
7.
7.
Okay.
Need a motion in a second.
Can we get a motion for that? Mr. Hardesty, how about a second?
I'll make a
Tim?
motion.
Any further discussion on that matter? Can we have roll call?
Mrs. Smiley?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polinick?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Who was the motion? Or was Mr. Hardesty?
Mr. Hardesty.
Who was the second then?
Tam.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Oh.
Okay.
Is there anything in the way of coming out of Harrisburg and when we
Have
might
not.
have numbers? Nothing.
Yeah, nothing final. A lot of debating.
Okay, next committee meeting is July the 6th at 7 p.m. and business meeting July 13th, also at 7 p.m. And as Mr. Johnston indicated earlier today, he would like to go to executive session after this meeting for personnel reasons. So folks, stick around for just a little bit. Is there any other business that needs brought before the board this evening?
I make the motion, we adjourn.
Do a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the meeting's adjourned. Thank you, folks.